Hi, this is Dr. Scott Werner, and this afternoon I'm going to do a continuation of the talk that I did yesterday about the love of God. And it's fascinating because currently most of humanity is in fear, they're in seclusion, they're being separated, and we are one. And the trick behind this whole thing is to separate us. Our thoughts, our wants, our desires separate us from the reality. So we're going to talk. I hope I turned that on. Yeah, oh, pause. Is it recording? Nope. For some reason this thing is not going. That's interesting. Okay. How are you? Glad to see we've got some people here. So what I'd like to do is expound on what I was talking about yesterday, because it's very vital information, very important. Better move over so I'm not in the way of my slides. Of course, my computer's clear over there, so I'll have to go over and change them. In the beginning, there was the Word, and the Word was God. And God came down and dwelt with us and taught us many beautiful things. And one of the most beautiful things that was taught is in, I'm going to pull it up here, in Matthew 22, 36 through 40. I want to make sure I give you the right one. I was going to say that one, but in Matthew 22, Jesus is teaching the people, and he's teaching them about love and very kind things and about the law. And a man approaches him to catch him. He's a Pharisee, and he wants to trick Jesus. And he says, "What's the most important law?" And Jesus said to him, "Love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, all thy mind, and all thy soul." And so we're going to do a little meditation, bringing in God's love into our hearts, our minds, and our soul. And so we're going to do this. I'm going to turn up the music a little bit, and I want you to breathe with me. This music vibrates in the heart vibration. That's why it's so soothing. Boy, that's a little loud. I'm going to turn it down just a hair, because we want to make this recording good. And I'm going to make this recording available to people. Yesterday they kind of messed up on the recording, so we're going to make another one. That's why I'm doing this again. I was going to go straight into the next talk. Okay, what I want you to do is take a big, deep, clearing breath. Bring in your breath up into your body from the earth. Send it up into the great central sun. Bring it back from the great central sun. Bring it back down into your heart. And breathe out. And now I want you to breathe in. Bring God's love into your heart. And make your heart full of the purity of God's love. And we bring God's love into our heart because that is how we honor God, is through bringing His love into our heart. And breathe out. Breathe in again. Breathe in God's love. Bring it into your heart. And know that God loves you and brings that love into your heart. And that love expands into your chest and into your lungs and your thymus gland. And breathe out. Breathe in a third time. Bring in the love of God into your heart. And have your heart expand that love of God into your body. And breathe out. Now we're going to bring the love of God up into our mind. All the way up into your mind, so that your mind is filled with God's love, fulfilling the second part of the commandment. And breathe out. Breathe in again. Up into your mind chakra, the seventh center of energy. And fill your mind with God's love so that you only have the thoughts of God's love for yourself and for others. And breathe out. Breathe in again. Bringing the God's love into your heart and connecting your heart and your mind together so you become one-minded with the thoughts and the love of God in your mind and in your heart, connecting them together. And breathe out. Breathe in again into your heart, God's love. Bring it up into your mind and then bring it up into your soul, your mighty I Am presence. Fill your mighty I Am presence with the presence of God's love. Connect that to your mind and to your heart and breathe out. Breathe in again. God's love into your heart, bring it up into the seventh center and then up into the eighth center, into the mighty I Am presence. God's love is connected to your soul and connected to your mind and connected to your heart, fulfilling the commandment to love thy God with all thy heart, mind, and soul. And breathe out. Okay, we're going to go ahead and relax this for a minute. Undo my, boy, it wants my face. Oh, there it came. Okay. Boy, they always want you to do all kinds of fun stuff. Okay. So we're stopped now on that. Now, we're going to talk about a couple of other things with God's love. Now, the other thing we're going to talk about is the second part of that commandment. Not only are you supposed to love the Lord thy God with all thy heart and all thy mind and all thy soul, but you're also, Jesus continued, and the second is like unto it, love thy neighbor as thyself. And this Pharisee said to him, who is my neighbor? Now, when I was meditating on this morning, I had a really interesting thing happen to me. It was 5 in the morning, and I had a visitor in my room, and he started talking to me, and I recognized him immediately. He was Jesus. And he says, Scott, talk about the modern definition of who is your neighbor. You know, we always think of the guy living next door to us or our tribe around us as being our neighbors. But that has shifted on the planet. And now our neighbors are the entire world. The United States is our neighbor. So we've got our love ourselves as our neighbor. The rest of the world is our neighbor because we can fly there in a matter of hours. You know, if we had the secret space program craft, we could get there in a matter of minutes and transport ourselves. But the fact is now, in this day and time, our neighbors are all our humans here on planet Earth. And so when we say, love yourself, love thy neighbor as thyself, do we really know how to love ourselves? And do we love ourselves? You know, that's the $56,000 question, is are we loving ourselves enough to even love our neighbors? Now, as I bring this up, a lot of questions came to my mind, and I said, well, teach me more about this. Now, Jesus said to me, you need to tell a story about loving yourself and loving your neighbor. Love thy neighbor as thyself. Now, when I was, in 2004, I was fighting against the federal government. And it was a fight for my medical practice, my patients, my clients, everything. And they were trying to find some way that I had committed fraud or committed some sort of treasonous act or anything else that they could find. And they had raided my office in 2000 on, believe it or not, and it went on the front page of the newspaper on Thanksgiving, the most read day of the year, and they tried to tell the public, this guy has committed 156 counts of fraud, and yet they didn't have one witness against me. And so I fought them in civil court, and I won, but then they came against me criminally. And, you know, here, they are my neighbor. Here's my neighbor, the United States, a country I loved for my whole life up to that time, and they were coming against me. And so I was still trying to love them and be kind, but I had to defend what I was doing. And I defended it, and I ended up having to become sovereign because I had to take back my powers because of maritime law and move it into common law. And the judge didn't like this. In fact, he threw me in jail the night up there in Salt Lake that I went through this. He just said, lock him up. And by the end of the day, he couldn't figure out what to do with me, so he let me out again. And I went back home, and I was trying to figure out what to do. And the judge sent me a thing saying I could not plead my case anymore. And so I sent him a pleading saying, you can't tell me I can't plead for my case, because that's my right. And within a week, the marshals showed up at my office. I was working. I had 8 people hooked up to chelation and a couple of people in rooms. And they shackled me, cuffed me, and threw me in the back of a van and took me away from my business. Well, I had people hooked up to IVs. Luckily, I'd taught my wife how to unhook people, and she did. But it started a 5-month process of being taken from prison to prison to prison. And during that time, they would not allow me to even plead my case, have any say at all. In fact, when I tried to ask them to let me use a computer, they refused. paper to write letters. They refused, and I was isolated. And so the only people I had to talk to were the people in the prison and the guards weren't supposed to talk to you. And so it was really interesting because, you know, my first cellie, or companion in the cell, they had 2 people in each cell, and he was an arms dealer, or he sold firearms. He hadn't done anything wrong, but the marshals had come to his place, picked him up, and locked him up in this prison. And I got put with him first, and he was a very kind neighbor. We actually got to know each other and love each other and be kind to each other, and we actually had some fun. And then I got transferred to a different prison because they were doing what they call diesel therapy to me, where they used to put the criminals in diesels and drive them around the country so nobody could find them. And at this time, they started transferring us just from jail to jail to jail. So by the time I got in touch with my wife and got some commissary, some decent food, they'd transfer me and I'd lose everything again and again and again. And I started getting a little bit angry about this because nothing was happening. And I ended up in a prison, and my cellie ended up being a meth drug addict. And I call meth, after I met this guy, the devil, because it makes you do things that are very evil. In fact, this cellie was absolutely horrible. He was something that I never wanted to be in my life. He would come in and he would brag about raping women, raping small girls. He would go into people's houses, steal money, steal whatever he could find. And if there was a kid in there or a woman, he would rape them. And he would brag about this. And every time he would talk, I just got angrier and angrier. And finally I said to him, "You either shut up or I will kill you." Now, did I love my neighbor at that time? No. I wanted to kill him. And I expressed that to him through my voice. And you know, I look back at that, and I look at what I had become. And luckily, you know, I said to the guard, I said, "You got to get this guy out of here. Either that or get me out of here, because I don't want to see what happens next." And I was at that point where something had to happen. And luckily, he was transferred out that night, out of my room. And again, I had peace. But let me tell you, that taught me a very important lesson. Certain things happen that irritate us, make us angry. This morning, when Jesus reviewed what had happened to me in that instance, he said, "Scott, you've always wondered when your cancer recurred in your body. And guess when it was? It was that night that I told my companion in my cell that I was ready to kill him." And when we want to kill others, guess what happens to us? We start killing ourselves. Very fascinating how Jesus said that to me, that I was actually, through my voice, I started the process of getting cancer again. I don't know if you guys know my history, but I developed cancer back in when I was 29 years old in 1987. I'd been exposed to lethal doses of radiation, not only being a downwinder living in southern Utah as a kid, but also was exposed to a lethal dose of radiation at St. Louis City hospitals. And within a year, I got malignant melanoma.